I started out painting about 10 years ago, and I probably thought about it for 10 or 20 years before that. And, when I started out as a sort of traditional plein air painter. I would be out there in the marsh with boots on, really spending a lot of time in places that I'd spent time before. At some point along the way, I found that being out there wasn't really capturing what I wanted to capture. And at the same time, in the barn that I'm sitting in here, we used to have a bunch of donkeys and horses, and they moved out about, say 5 years ago, let's say. And I moved into the barn and began painting from memory. And I have found that works better for me. And I think it also works better for people who are drawn to my work, because I think the more open a painting is, the more people can connect to their own experience. So I work largely from memory. I work mostly at a large scale, although I sometimes begin at a smaller scale with smaller studies. But my work is primarily about trying to create not so much a painting, but an experience. In a way, when I'm doing a painting, it's the experience all over again, because I don't necessarily know where I'm going with a painting. I have a strategy, but an experience sort of emerges there in the work, particularly a larger work. And one morning I'll walk into the studio and I will realize, okay, that's done. The indeterminate colors that you find in nature, particularly at the beginning and the end of the day, where you can't quite read it, that's what interests me. And so, it's quite astute of you to notice that there's not that much difference between that little 3-inch by 4-inch painting and the, say, 4 foot by 6 foot one behind me. I think for me, like everybody, the biggest challenge is personal, and trying to kind of maintain the connections with the people that are important to you when you can't necessarily see them in person. But as an artist, it hasn't really changed that much for me. I mean, after all, when you're a painter, you're not working collaboratively. You don't need to be on a Zoom call to do a painting. It's a solitary experience. So to that extent, it hasn't really changed. I think it's interesting what you say about palettes. I'm sure looking back, many artists will say, gosh, that was kind of a dark period. But right now, in terms of the way I work, hasn't really changed anything.